Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
The Minnesota Vikings just pulled off something that seemed absolutely impossible. And if you're not paying attention to what's happening right now, you're missing one of the most incredible defensive performances in recent NFL history. When a team wins by double digits with their quarterback throwing for only 51 yards, you know something extraordinary is happening. And that something has a name, Brian Flores. Let's set the scene here because this is where things get absolutely wild. Christmas Day, 2024. The Detroit Lions desperately needed this victory to keep their playoff dreams alive. They came into this game averaging 30 points per contest, riding high with one of the most explosive offenses in the league. And what happened? The Minnesota Vikings defense absolutely obliterated them, holding Detroit to a mere 161 total yards in a 23-10 beatdown that wasn't even as close as the score suggests. This wasn't just a win. This was a statement. This was a defensive coordinator putting on an absolute clinic and reminding the entire National Football League why he's about to become one of the hottest head coaching candidates this offseason. Brian Flores didn't just game plan for the Lions. He completely dismantled them, picked them apart piece by piece, and left their offense looking like a college squad trying to compete against professionals. 6 takeaways, 5 sacks, complete and utter domination on every single snap. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. The Vikings defense isn't exactly loaded with superstar talent across the board. This is a unit that talent-wise probably grades out somewhere between a B and B- level personnel group. But under Flores, they play like an A-plus elite championship defense every single week. Think about what that means for a second. Flores is taking average talent and making them look like pro bowlers. He's scheming up plays that have opposing quarterbacks seeing ghosts, second-guessing every read, hesitating on throws they normally make with confidence. That's not just good coaching. That's generational coaching. That's the kind of defensive mind that changes franchises. Let's talk about what happened to Jared Goff in this game, because it was Flores had him completely figured out, knew exactly what Detroit wanted to do, and had an answer for everything. The creativity in Flores' scheme is what separates him from every other defensive coordinator in the league. He's not running some basic vanilla defense that offensive coordinators can figure out by halftime. He's constantly mixing coverages, bringing pressure from different angles, disguising his intentions pre-snap, and making quarterbacks process information at a speed that's simply too fast for them to handle. One play he's showing blitz and dropping into coverage. The next play he's showing coverage and bringing an overload blitz from the opposite side. Quarterbacks have no idea what's coming, and by the time they figure it out, they're already on their backs. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that should have every Vikings fan both thrilled and terrified at the same time. Flores is almost certainly going to get head coaching interviews this offseason. Teams like the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, potentially the Chicago Bears, they're all going to be lining up to talk to this man. And honestly, they should be. If you're a struggling franchise looking for a head coach who can immediately transform your team's culture and identity, Brian Flores should be at the absolute top of your list. Think about what Flores brings to the table as a potential head coach. First and foremost, you know beyond any shadow of a doubt that your defense is going to be elite. It doesn't matter if you have the worst personnel in the league. Flores will scheme them into a top 20 unit minimum, give him decent players, and you're looking at a top 10 defense. Give him elite talent, and you've got a legitimate championship caliber defense that can carry your entire team. That's not speculation. That's what we've watched him do in Minnesota this season. The Vikings defense has been on an absolutely ridiculous run over the past month. They shut out the Washington Commanders completely. They did an outstanding job against the Dallas Cowboys. They dominated the New York Giants. And now they just embarrassed the Detroit Lions on national television on Christmas Day. 4 straight weeks of elite, shut-down defensive performances. That's not a fluke. That's not lucky. That's a defensive coordinator operating at the absolute peak of his abilities. Harrison Smith turned back the clock in this game, looking like the perennial Pro Bowl safety he was in his prime. He was everywhere on the field, making plays, recording an interception, getting pressure on the quarterback, disrupting passing lanes. At this stage of his career, Smith is playing some of his best football, and you can directly attribute that to Flores putting him in positions to succeed. That's what great coordinators do. They understand their players' strengths and weaknesses intimately, and they craft their scheme to maximize what each player does best. Andrew Van Ginkel was another absolute monster in this game. 2 fumble recoveries, 2 quarterback hits, 1.5 sacks, a tackle for loss. This guy was living in the Lions' backfield all afternoon. Van Ginkel has been a revelation for the Vikings this season. And again, much of that credit goes to Flores for utilizing him perfectly. These aren't household names we're talking about. These aren't guys who make all-pro teams on talent alone. These are solid NFL players who are being elevated by exceptional coaching. Even Eric Wilson, a journeyman linebacker who's bounced around the league, had another fantastic performance. That's the Flores effect. He takes guys who other teams don't want or undervalue, and he turns them into productive contributors in his system. It's like watching a master chef take basic ingredients and create a 5-star meal. The ingredients matter, sure, but the preparation and execution are what make it special. Now let's talk about what happened to Jahmyr Gibbs in this game, because it was borderline embarrassing for Detroit. Gibbs came into this game as one of the most explosive running backs in football, a guy who can break off huge runs and catch passes out of the backfield. Flores completely neutralized him. 17 carries for only 41 yards. That's 2.4 yards per carry, which is absolutely atrocious for a running back of Gibbs's caliber. Over 2 games against Minnesota this season, Gibbs hasn't even rushed for 100 total yards. Think about how remarkable that is. Flores has completely solved one of the league's most dangerous young offensive weapons. The key to Flores' defensive success is winning on early downs. If you can force offenses into obvious passing situations on 3rd and long, you can unleash your pass rush and put quarterbacks in impossible positions. The Vikings consistently won 1st and 2nd down today, stuffing the run, making tackles for minimal gains, forcing Detroit into 3rd and long situations where Flores could dial up creative pressure packages. That's textbook defensive football executed at the highest level. But here's where things get complicated for Minnesota, and this is going to be a fascinating storyline to follow this offseason. The Vikings won this game by 13 points despite their quarterback throwing for only 51 yards. Let me repeat that because it's so absurd it bears repeating. Max Bromer completed 9 of 16 passes for 51 yards, and the Vikings won by 2 scores. That should be impossible in the modern NFL, where offenses dominate and quarterbacks need to throw for 300 yards to be competitive. But it happened because the defense was that dominant. This raises a serious question that Vikings ownership and management are going to have to grapple with this offseason. Who's the better coach on the Minnesota staff? Is it head coach Kevin O'Connell, the offensive guru who's supposed to be this brilliant play caller? Or is it defensive coordinator Brian Flores, the mastermind who keeps winning games despite having subpar offensive support? Kevin O'Connell is a good coach. Nobody's disputing that. He helped. You need elite quarterback play. You need excellent pass protection. You need time in the pocket for routes to develop. When any of those elements break down, the entire offense becomes anemic and unwatchable. Today's offensive performance was absolutely horrific. The Vikings couldn't move the ball. At one point in the game, they had the same number of punts as first downs. That's high school football statistics. Jordan Addison had a 74-yard run late in the game that inflated the numbers, but before that, the offense was completely stuck in neutral. And this isn't an isolated incident. We've seen this pattern repeat itself week after week after week this season whenever the Vikings don't have optimal conditions. O'Connell reminds me of a baseball pitcher who throws 104 miles per hour but only has one pitch. When that pitch is working, it's unhittable. But when hitters adjust or the pitch isn't quite right, there's no plan B. There's no adjustment. Other elite offensive coaches like Kyle Shanahan or Ben Johnson or Matt LaFleur, they're constantly adapting their schemes to their personnel. They're adjusting their game plans based on who's healthy, who the opponent is, what the situation demands. O'Connell doesn't seem to do that. He has his system, and he runs his system regardless of circumstances. That works great when you have Sam Darnold playing at a high level with clean pockets and time to throw. But what happens when your quarterback is Max Bromer? What happens when your offensive tackles are injured? What happens when your starting center is out? The offense completely falls apart because there's no contingency plan, no simplified approach, no pivot to a quick passing game or a heavy run scheme. The Vikings still can't run the football effectively in O'Connell's scheme. That's a massive problem. If you can't run the ball, you become one-dimensional. Defenses can pin their ears back and rush the passer. They don't have to respect play action. They can play coverage and make your quarterback hold the ball and make perfect throws. That's an incredibly difficult way to win football games consistently. Look at last year's playoff loss to the Rams. Sam Darnold struggled in that game partly because he was holding the ball too long. But why was he holding the ball too long? Because O'Connell's passing concepts take time to develop. Routes need to get down the field. Spacing needs to be created. If the protection breaks down before that happens, the quarterback has nowhere to go with the football. Why can't O'Connell simplify things? Why can't he design more quick game concepts that Vikings management needs to ask this offseason? And here's where it gets really interesting from a strategic standpoint. If Brian Flores leaves for a head coaching job, what do? Do you let one of the best defensive coordinators in football walk out the door? Or do you do everything in your power to keep him, even if that means making some uncomfortable decisions about the offensive side of the ball? This is not an easy call. Both coaches bring tremendous value to the organization. But if you're being honest and objective, which coach has done more with less this season? Which coach has consistently elevated his unit's performance regardless of circumstances? Which coach has won games almost single-handedly through his scheming and preparation? The answer is Brian Flores, and it's not particularly close. Flores did this without Jonathan Greenard, one of his best pass rushers. He did this without Josh Metellus. He took a defense that shouldn't be this good on paper and turned them into a dominant force that just eliminated a playoff contender on Christmas Day. He owned the Detroit Lions in both matchups this season. He made their offense look absolutely foolish. That's elite coaching at the highest level. Now, Vikings fans are sitting at 8-8 after what's been a season from hell, full of injuries and quarterback changes and drama and disappointment. And yet here they are, still somehow relevant, still winning games. And there's something beautifully, painfully Vikings about all of this. They have the most Vikings ending to a season imaginable. Everything goes wrong all year long. And then you look up and realize they're 500. The social media team is tweeting out, prove them wrong, like this is some underdog story. It's almost comical. But underneath all the chaos and dysfunction and weird vibes around this season, there's something genuinely special happening with this defense. It's been an honor to watch Brian Flores work this season. His creativity, his preparation, his ability to make very good NFL quarterbacks look like practice squad players. It's been remarkable. He doesn't just beat you with scheme. He beats you with attitude and physicality and relentless effort from his players. His defenses play with an edge, a nastiness, a refusal to give an inch that you can't teach. The question now becomes what happens next. If Flores gets a head coaching opportunity, does he take it? Of course he does. This is a man who got unfairly blackballed from the league after his time in Miami, who had to rebuild his reputation as a position coach, who worked his way back up to coordinator. If a team offers him a head coaching job, he's earned the right to take it, and frankly, whatever team hires him is getting one hell of a coach. For Vikings fans, this creates a fascinating dilemma. Do you root for Flores to stay because you know the defense will remain elite, or do you root for him to get a head coaching job because he deserves that opportunity and it would be wrong to hold him back? It's a bittersweet situation either way. You want good things for people you respect, but you also want your team to succeed, and those two things might be in conflict here. The other consideration is the schedule implications of this win. By jumping the Lions in the standings, Minnesota now has a third-place schedule next season instead of a fourth-place schedule. That might sound trivial, but it's the difference between playing the Arizona Cardinals versus the San Francisco 49ers, Seattle Seahawks, or Los Angeles Rams. It's the difference between playing the Washington Commanders versus the New York Giants. Over a 17-game season, those matchup differences can significantly impact your win total and playoff chances. Of course, the NFL changes so dramatically from year to year that it's almost impossible to predict which opponents will actually be tougher. Teams that were terrible this year could be good next year. Teams that were dominant this year could fall apart. There's so much roster turnover, so many injuries, so many variables that schedule strength projections are almost meaningless beyond the immediate moment. What matters right now is that Brian Flores just put together another masterpiece of defensive game planning. He embarrassed a good offensive team on national television. He showed once again why he's going to be a head coach in this league very soon. And he reminded everyone that defense still matters in the modern NFL. You can't just outscore everybody. Eventually, you're going to face a defense that can stop you, that can create turnovers, that can take the game over and win it for their team. That's what happened today. The Vikings now have some massive decisions to make this offseason. What do you do with the quarterback position? Is Sam Darnold your starter going into next year? Do you draft J.J. McCarthy's replacement? Do you sign someone in free agency? What do you do about the offensive line, which has been a disaster all season? How do you improve the running game? And most importantly, what do you do if Brian Flores gets a head coaching offer? These aren't easy questions. There are no obvious answers. But one thing is absolutely certain. What Brian Flores has done with this defense this season has been nothing short of extraordinary. He's taken a group of guys who nobody feared coming into the year and turned them into one of the most feared defensive units in the entire league. That's coaching. That's scheme. That's preparation. That's a man who understands football at a level very few people do. So while everyone debates whether this win was good or bad for the Vikings' long-term future, while people argue about draft position and schedule strength and all those other considerations, let's just take a moment to appreciate what we witnessed today. We watched a defensive coordinator absolutely eviscerate one of the league's best offenses. We watched a masterclass in preparation and execution. We watched Brian Flores cement his legacy as one of the best defensive minds in football. Whether he's back in Minnesota next year or coaching somewhere else, Brian Flores just proved once again that great coaching still matters in the NFL. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have the right scheme and the right preparation and the right adjustments, you're going to lose to a team that does. The Lions learned that lesson the hard way today. They came in needing a win desperately, and they got absolutely dominated by a defense that wanted it more and was coached better. That's the bottom line. Brian Flores saved Christmas for Vikings fans. He delivered a performance that will be remembered for years, and he showed everyone watching that he's ready for the next step in his coaching career. Whatever happens next, Vikings fans should be grateful they got to watch this defense operate at such a high level this season. It's been special. It's been fun, and it's been a reminder that in a league obsessed with offense, defense can still win championships. Make sure you hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. Drop a comment below telling us whether you think Brian Flores should be a head coach next season and which team should hire him. And subscribe to the channel so you never miss another video breaking down all the biggest storylines in the NFL. This is the kind of content we bring you every single day, and we can't do it without your support. So show us some love, engage with the content, and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, keep watching, keep supporting, and remember, defense wins championships, and Brian Flores just proved it once again.